If one day, you happen to see a woman sitting silently in a wedding dress soaked with tears, her eyes gazing up at the world as if all hope has shattered, what would you do? Would you turn away, believing fate has been sealed? Or would you pause, sit beside her, and say, "Take my hand, because this story isn't over yet"? This is not a fairy tale. There is no perfect prince, no magic spell appearing from nowhere. This is the story of a woman who collapsed amid her shattered dreams. A man who had once lost everything. And a little boy, carrying an innocent but fierce heart, like a flame that never dies. When these three lives crossed paths, they not only rediscovered lost hope, but they also taught us. True miracles do not fall from the sky. They come from trembling yet brave footsteps moving forward. Join me on this journey, where scars turn into light, and where love can illuminate even the darkest days. And don't forget, if this story touches your heart, please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because somewhere out there, someone else might also need a story like this to believe that they are not alone. Some journeys seem like small detours in our busy lives, but they are turns toward destiny. That morning, Vermont greeted Ethan Bennett and his son, Noah, with the first rays of sunlight sparkling over rolling green hills, and village roads winding like silver threads delicately embroidered across a natural tapestry. Ethan's old pickup truck hummed like a whisper from the past, carrying father and son past golden cornfields, the breeze slipping through the window to tousle a few salt and pepper strands at Ethan's temples. His hands gripped the steering wheel until they turned white, as if trying to hold tight to time itself, dragging him unwillingly toward the past. In the rearview mirror, the small, peaceful image of Noah came into view. The 8-year-old boy had dozed off after the long journey, his arms clutching a well-worn teddy bear, its edges frayed from countless nights of comfort. Under the sunlight, his cheeks flushed pink, and his long lashes fluttered gently with each breath. It was the only thing anchoring Ethan's turbulent emotions. Swirling within his chest, Ethan knew well. This return to Willow Springs was not just about helping Noah complete his family heritage school project. It was a confrontation with old wounds, scars that seemed to have healed but could ache anew with just the slightest breeze. Her image still wove itself into his dreams, soft brown hair, a smile brighter than Vermont's sun, and those expressive eyes that once made him swear to protect her for life. But now, everything was only a memory, as faded as the peeling paint on the walls of the church they were about to enter. Noah stirred slightly, his sleepy voice floating from the back seat. "Dad, are we almost there?" Ethan glanced at the rearview mirror, masking his unease with a faint smile. "Yes, almost there, son. I want to show you a very special place." Noah blinked, still drowsy, but curiosity sparkled in his innocent eyes. "Will it be fun?" "Dad?" Ethan let out a quiet laugh, tinged with bittersweetness. "If you enjoy stories with no endings, then you'll love it." What seemed like a casual remark was a foreshadowing of the turbulent new chapter awaiting them. The truck slowly turned onto the gravel path leading up to the old church. Saint Mary of the Willows. Ethan silently read the name in his mind, as though whispering to the past itself. The church still stood proudly atop the hill, its steeple reaching toward the cloudless sky. The white-painted walls had faded with time, and the stained glass windows still caught the sunlight, reflecting distant memories like broken fragments pieced together in Ethan's mind. He stepped out of the truck, taking a deep breath as if to gather the courage to cross the line between the present and the past. Noah trotted beside him, eyes wide with curiosity at the unfamiliar surroundings. Suddenly, Ethan's gaze froze. His heart felt as though it had been seized in an invisible grip. Right there, on the stone steps leading to the church, bathed in the golden afternoon light, was a sight that made time stand still. A woman, in a bright white wedding dress, her soft hair cascading to her shoulders, her face bowed but unable to hide the tears tracing silently down her cheeks. The wheelchair beneath her sat silently, like a mute witness to her deep sorrow. Ethan was stunned, his breath caught in his throat. "Isabel," he whispered her name in his mind, as if saying it aloud could dissolve all the distance carved by time. She was still as beautiful as ever, no matter how harsh the years had been. But now, Her beauty was veiled by a mist of sadness, a fragile blend of pain and vulnerability that stirred both pity and an irresistible pull. Noah fell silent too, then tightened his grip on his father's hand, his round eyes wide as he whispered. Yet his words rang like a bell in Ethan's heart. "Dad, she looks like someone who needs us." Ethan swallowed hard. His heart pounded, not from nostalgia, but from an overwhelming sense, as if fate had strung an invisible thread, drawing them together once more. That moment, to Ethan, was not just a shock. It was a deep cut straight to his soul, awakening long-dormant desires. He held his son's hand tightly, but his eyes remained fixed on the woman on the steps. He knew this was no random coincidence. This was a door of destiny, creaking open to a new chapter of their unfinished story from 10 years ago. And Ethan, though fearful, understood. He could not turn away. The evening breeze slipped softly through the crevices of the old church, carrying with it the scent of decaying wood and wildflowers that lingered in the air. All other sounds seemed to blur, leaving only the heavy, resonant thud of Ethan's heart pounding in his chest. He stood there, motionless, as the image of the woman in the pristine white wedding dress before him gradually resolved from a stranger into a vivid fragment of memory. Isabel Hartman, the girl who had once been his whole youth, the most unfinished dream of his life. In the dusk light, she was as beautiful as ever, but the sorrow etched deep on her face rendered her beauty fragile, like morning mist at the mercy of the rising sun. Her eyes were swollen and red from weeping, her trembling hands clinging to her crumpled veil as if trying to preserve a final shred of dignity amidst the storm inside her. Noah squeezed Ethan's hand tightly, as if to anchor his father to the present moment. "Dad," the boy's voice rang clear and innocent, yet to Ethan, it sounded like a tolling bell, urging the long-buried emotions in his heart awake. "Is she the lady you once loved?" Ethan couldn't answer. His throat tightened with unspoken feelings. He took slow, heavy steps toward Isabel, each stride as if he were treading across layers of old, aching memories. She looked up, and in that instant when their eyes met, time seemed to suffocate. No words escaped them, only a heavy, stretched silence. The silence of things left unsaid, of questions that had never been answered. "Isabel?" Ethan finally broke the stillness, his voice hoarse and cracked, like pebbles tumbling into a deep ravine. Her lips quivered. She tried to muster a smile, but it emerged crooked, filled with bitterness. "Ethan," she whispered, like a breeze across autumn leaves, "you weren't supposed to see me like this." A tear rolled down her cheek, staining the bridal fabric below, a small but potent witness to the sorrow seeping from her heart. Ethan clenched his fists, struggling to contain the swell of emotions rising within him. He couldn't bear to see the woman he had once loved so deeply crumbling like this. "Isabel, what happened?" he asked, his voice low and earnest, heavy with unspoken pain. She raised her eyes to meet his, no longer avoiding his gaze, her tear-filled eyes locking onto him with raw honesty. "Today was supposed to be my wedding day." Her voice trembled, fracturing like shards of broken glass, reflecting thousands of piercing beams of pain. "But he left before it could even begin." Her words cracked, frail as fallen leaves. "He said he didn't have the courage. That living with me would only remind him every day of what I had lost." Ethan felt as though his heart was being crushed. Anger welled up in his chest, intertwining with an uncontrollable wave of compassion. "He's a coward," Ethan said, unable to conceal his disdain. "But Isabel, you were never a burden." That simple, straightforward declaration, laden with so much tenderness and respect, ignited a small flame in Isabel's heart. Her eyes blinked, and for a moment, the tears stopped. Noah, standing close by, continued to observe with the innocence only children possess. He gazed at Isabel for a long moment and then, in a voice pure and sincere, said, "Miss, I think you're walking with your heart." An innocent statement, yet it pierced through the hard shell Isabel had built around her wounded soul. She let out a faint smile, frail but genuine, the first honest smile of her tear-soaked day. "You're such a sweet boy," she said, her eyes glistening with tears but brighter than they had been all day. Ethan sat beside her on the stone steps, the physical gap between them narrowing, but more importantly, The emotional distance as well. His gaze softened, filled with profound understanding. If you need someone to sit with you right now, he said, his voice gentle, Noah and I will be here. Not for any other reason, simply because you deserve it. Isabel choked back her emotions. The defenses she had built over the years crumbled before such simple yet profound kindness. In that moment, the breeze swept gently across the golden fields, as if nature itself bore witness to a new chapter unfolding for these three souls. Three lonely hearts inadvertently drawn together at the crossroads of fate. It was not a perfect beginning, but it was enough to warm the wounds they thought would remain frozen forever. Blank. Underscore. Blank. Blank. Underscore. Blank. The setting sun stretched long shadows across the worn stone courtyard of St. Mary of the Willows. A soft breeze drifted by, brushing through the ancient maple trees, rustling the amber leaves like forgotten love letters carried back from memory's depths. Ethan sat beside Isabel on the cold stone steps, the space between them seemingly vast, yet at this moment, it felt breathlessly close. Isabel, still in her crumpled wedding dress, absent-mindedly traced the edge of her tear-dampened veil. The hurt carved into her face resembled the cracks on a frozen lake, fragile, yet impossibly deep. Ethan gazed at her silently. Inside, waves of memories crashed upon his heart. He remembered clearly the day she left him, leaving him alone at the altar, drowning in an abyss of pain. He had buried everything, locking his heart behind heavy chains forged by time. But here she was, no longer a mere shadow in his past, but Isabel, real, wounded, and heartbreakingly human, right in front of him. Noah stood nearby, his round eyes filled with confusion and quiet sympathy. He looked up at his father, then asked cautiously, Dad, what happened to her? Ethan gently brushed a hand through his son's soft hair, his voice low and reflective. Sometimes, Noah, people feel pain because they've loved someone deeply, and that person left them when they needed them the most. The boy thought for a moment, then nodded, his young eyes shimmering with a depth of understanding far beyond his years. Isabel turned her face away, trying to hide the lingering tears. I'm sorry your son had to witness me like this. Her voice rasped, hoarse from too many tears. Too much sorrow. Ethan shook his head slowly, his eyes warm and steady. No, Isabel, he needs to see this, to understand that no matter how much it hurts, people can still sit beside each other, share the pain, and help one another rise again. Noah stepped closer, without hesitation, and crouched before Isabel. The boy held out his old, well-worn teddy bear, his treasured companion, never far from his side. Would you like to hold this for a while, miss? Noah offered, his voice bright with innocent sincerity. My mom used to say that when I'm sad, hugging him makes it all feel a little warmer. Isabel froze for a moment. That simple gesture overwhelmed her more than any grand speech could have. She accepted the teddy bear, clutching it close to her chest, a single tear rolling down her cheek as she whispered, Thank you, Noah. Her voice trembled, but in her eyes, for the first time that day, a flicker of light sparked. Ethan felt a quiet warmth stir in his heart. The invisible thread connecting the three of them tightened gently, not through memories of old pain, but through the shared empathy of kindred souls. Isabel, Ethan said softly, would you like to leave this place for a while? We could go to the Maple Leaf Inn, where Noah and I are staying. Isabel hesitated, glancing down at her wrinkled wedding gown, then at the wheelchair beneath her, as if wondering whether she could still move forward at all, even if only to take the next small step. Ethan caught the hesitation in her eyes. He leaned forward slightly, his voice low but firm, carrying a quiet strength. You don't need to be perfect to start again, Isabel. You only need to open your heart one more time. She let out a deep breath, as though trying to exhale the weight that had burdened her chest for far too long. Then, with a faint, determined smile, she nodded. Maybe, I do need a place that isn't as cold as these stone steps. Ethan gently took her hand, not to pull her up, but to say, I am here, I will always be here. Noah cheered excitedly. Can we have dinner together? Isabel let out a soft laugh. Faint, yet it carried the power to soothe storms in her soul. Yes, she replied. We'll have dinner together. The evening breeze played gently with her hair, carrying a familiar scent that stirred something deep inside Ethan. Some memories, he realized, never fade. And so, the three of them, wounded souls, left behind the church, the place that had once been a monument to sorrow, and moved toward a new place where, perhaps, hope was quietly waiting to be rekindled. By the time they arrived at Maple Leaf Inn, the sun had already dipped below the horizon. The modest inn nestled along the winding country road, embraced by lilac bushes in full bloom. The old oak door creaked open, as if welcoming the three most special guests of the day, 3 people, each carrying wounds yet unknowingly warming one another with their very vulnerabilities. Isabel cast her gaze around the simple yet cozy dining room. The soft yellow glow from the fabric lampshades draped everything in gentle light, like silk wrapping their hearts in a quiet embrace. For the first time in days, she felt her shoulders lighten, if only a little. Noah, ever the lively child, eagerly pulled out a chair for Isabel, his face beaming with innocent excitement. "Miss Isabel, do you like apple pie? I heard they make the best here." A genuine smile broke across Isabel's face, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "Well, if you recommend it, then I certainly must try." Ethan watched them, a quiet warmth blooming in his chest. He noticed something. The cracks in Isabel's soul, once so deep and ragged, were slowly beginning to mend, not through grand gestures, but through Noah's pure-hearted, simple kindness. "They also have a special roasted chicken dish here," Ethan added, his voice warm and gentle, though he carefully masked the surge of emotion rising inside him. "I think you'll love it." Dinner unfolded at a leisurely pace, filled with small, tender conversations. Noah spoke about his school project, family heritage, about his mother, the gentle woman who had passed away, and how he always imagined her smiling down at him from the clouds above. Isabel listened intently, her eyes softening with empathy. She lightly squeezed Noah's small hand as he spoke of his mother, offering silent but profound comfort. "You know, Noah," Isabel said softly, her voice catching slightly with emotion, "there are people we love who, even when they're no longer by our side, have never truly left us." Noah's wide eyes met hers, like Dad always says. "Right? That mom is always in my heart." Isabel nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "Yes, you're absolutely right." The room seemed to glow warmer than ever. Invisible walls crumbled quietly between them, replaced by a single, strong thread of understanding and shared sorrow. After dinner, they sat together on the inn's front porch, where the sunset unfurled like silk ribbons across the sky, embracing the small village in nature's tender arms. The breeze carried the scent of the open fields, as if whispering promises of a gentler tomorrow. Noah, playing with fallen petals, suddenly looked up and asked, in all seriousness, "Miss Isabel, you used to teach dancing, right? Could you teach me?" The innocent question startled Isabel. How long had it been since she thought of her worn-out ballet slippers, of the wooden floors beneath her feet, of the music once pulsing through her veins? She had believed she buried those dreams beneath the dust of time. But now, a small part of that old fire flickered to life again. Ethan watched her, his eyes quietly encouraging. "If you want to, let yourself feel the music again." Isabel drew a deep breath, her gaze softening as she looked at the hopeful little boy. "You know, Noah, I can't dance like before, but I believe I can still teach you how to dance with your heart." Noah beamed. "Just like I said earlier, walk with your heart." Isabel smiled gently, her eyes sparkling with a light Ethan had not seen in her for many years. Without waiting, Noah spread his arms wide, imitating dance poses he had seen on TV. His small feet shuffled clumsily on the old wooden floor, yet his enthusiasm was boundless. Isabel raised her hand gracefully, guiding him with delicate, loving gestures. Slowly, patiently, she instructed him, not with the precision of a perfect ballerina, but with the warmth of someone sharing her very soul. Ethan stood quietly to the side, his eyes never leaving them. The moment felt ordinary, yet it resonated deeply within him. This wasn't just a dance lesson, it was a dance of rebirth. The evening breeze swirled around them, scattering lilac petals like confetti. In that instant, It felt as though the entire universe had paused to witness the tiny miracle unfolding before them. Ethan realized then, there was no need to wait for miracles from the heavens. For the true miracle was right here, in Noah's bright laughter, in Isabel's rekindled spark, and the renewed rhythm of his own heart. That night at Maple Leaf Inn, as the sunset gave way to a canopy of twinkling stars above the quiet countryside of Willow Springs, Isabel sat alone by the wooden window frame. The moonlight cast a silvery glow across her face, softening the lines of weariness that still lingered from the day filled with tears. Outside, the sounds of crickets and the gentle rustling of leaves blended with the light night breeze, creating nature's lullaby, a melody of peace long forgotten. Ethan stood by the door of the living room, his gaze resting on Isabel without wavering. He knew, more than anyone, the storm that was still raging inside her. Deep in her heart, two forces battled fiercely, the paralyzing fear of failure, and the burning desire to rise once again. No one spoke. The silence of the night seemed sacred, as though any words might shatter its fragile calm. Then, quietly, small footsteps pattered across the wooden floor. Noah, his bare feet barely making a sound, stepped out of the bedroom, his hair tousled, his eyes sleepy yet shining with that unwavering spark of hope. He softly asked, "Miss Isabel, will you teach me to dance again tomorrow?" That simple question felt like a torch rekindling the flickering embers in Isabel's heart. She turned to him, her eyes meeting his clear, innocent gaze. There was a brief silence. Then she nodded slowly, warmth creeping back into her voice. "Perhaps. I'll teach you something even more wonderful." The next morning, the sky wept with a gentle rain. Fine threads of water streaked the windows, composing a soft symphony of droplets on the old tiled roof of Maple Leaf Inn. Isabel sat quietly in the living room, her hands intertwined tightly, her eyes gazing out at the garden beyond the glass panes. Inside her, a decision was taking root, a choice that could change everything. Ethan stepped in, holding a steaming cup of tea in his hands. He placed it gently on the table in front of her, his gaze kind yet resolute. "Isabel," he began, his voice calm, "I've thought about what you said yesterday, about the things you've lost. But you know, there are things we never truly lose. Sometimes, we just stop believing in them." Isabel lifted her eyes, uncertainty and a flicker of fragile hope reflected in their depths. "What are you talking about?" Ethan reached for her hands, his palms warm and firm, as if willing courage into her very bones. "You used to inspire people with your dancing. You still do. They're waiting. Isabel, they're waiting for you to take that step again. In any way you can." She felt her heart tremble. A strange sensation coursed through her, both terrifying and thrilling, like a familiar rhythm she had almost forgotten. Ethan continued, his voice deep and full of quiet power. "I've spoken with the rehabilitation center in town. If you're ready, we can go today." The room seemed to freeze for a moment. Isabel turned away, her eyes following the rivulets of rain trickling down the window, their paths like the many uncertainties clouding her mind. The old fear whispered inside her. What if I fail again? What if I never walk as I once did? But then, a small, warm hand clasped hers tightly. Noah, his eyes glowing with pure admiration and unconditional love, whispered, "You taught me to walk with my heart. Remember? Now it's time to teach yourself too." It was as if those words unlocked something within her. Isabel drew in a deep breath, letting it fill her chest and sweep away the lingering shadows. "All right," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "Let's go. I'm ready to try." Ethan's lips curled into the faintest of smiles, one he had waited over a decade to wear. "I always knew you would." And so, on that softly raining morning, Ethan's old pickup truck set off once again, not just carrying 3 people, but a fragile yet brilliant spark of hope. The truck rumbled along the quiet country roads, its tires tracing wet trails on the damp ground, as if marking the beginning of a quiet but determined resurrection. Isabel sat by the window, her fingers gently brushing against the misted glass, her gaze set firmly on the horizon ahead. Deep inside, she knew, this time, no matter what happens, I will not back down. The morning rain fell gently on the roof of the old truck, like the slow, steady beat of time itself. as they drove toward the rehabilitation center in Willow Springs. The air inside the cabin was filled with a quiet intensity, as if even their breaths were attuned to the rhythm of the droplets. Noah sat in the back seat, hugging his familiar, well-worn teddy bear, his head tilted slightly as he watched Isabel with hopeful eyes. Every glance from Noah, every reassuring smile from Ethan, felt like invisible hands lifting Isabel over the invisible walls of her fear. They arrived at the center just before noon. The modest building, painted in soft gray, nestled quietly beneath a canopy of maples. Far from the cold sterility Isabel had imagined, it radiated a comforting warmth, with honey-hued wooden walls and wide, clear windows that overlooked lush, green gardens. From her wheelchair, Isabel gazed through the glass panels. Inside, she saw others like her, some struggling to stand, others straining to lift weary arms. But what caught her breath was the glimmer of determination in their every movement. The silent courage shining through their smallest actions. Margot Blaine, the lead therapist, approached, a woman in her 50s. Margot's sharp eyes held a depth of understanding, softened by an underlying warmth. She knelt to meet Isabel's gaze directly and offered an encouraging smile. "Ms. Hartman, you've already done the hardest part. You came here." Isabel returned a faint smile, though a tide of anxiety still churned within her. "I've fallen so many times, Dr. Blaine." Margot nodded, her tone firm but kind. "That's precisely why you'll rise stronger. Each fall teaches your body something new, but more importantly, it teaches your spirit." The first session began. Ethan and Noah watched silently from outside the practice room, their hearts caught between hope and worry. Noah waved energetically, his bright eyes a constant beacon, while Ethan gripped the window frame, as if steadying himself against the weight of his emotions. Isabel clenched the armrests of her wheelchair, her palms cold with sweat, as Margot helped her transition to the support frame. Isabel's heart pounded wildly, her nerves stretched tight like a violin string ready to snap. "We'll go slowly," Margot reassured her, her voice steady and rhythmic, like a metronome guiding her through the storm. Drawing every ounce of strength from within, Isabel summoned her willpower into her legs that once carried her across grand stages with effortless grace. Now, they felt heavy, foreign, trembling beneath her, as she tried to lift herself. A sharp, electrifying pain shot through her body, from her hip down to her foot, stealing her breath away. Her knees buckled, she nearly collapsed. Margot caught her in time. Outside, Ethan flinched, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the frame of the window tighter. While Noah cried out, "Miss Isabel." At that moment, it felt as though all the effort Isabel had built over these past days crumbled into dust. Her head hung low, and droplets of sweat mixed with tears slipped from her face onto the polished wooden floor below. I can't do this." Her voice cracked, fragile as shattered porcelain. Ethan couldn't bear it anymore. He stepped into the room, knelt beside her, and placed his hand over hers, her hand, cold and trembling with despair. "I'm here," Ethan whispered, his words simple yet overflowing with quiet strength. No explanations were needed. His presence alone spoke volumes. Margot did not rush to comfort or offer false hope. She simply nodded in acknowledgement of Isabel's courage, respecting the battle she had just fought. Even in defeat, the session ended in heavy silence. On the way back to Maple Leaf Inn, the rain had ceased, but puddles still mirrored the overcast sky. Isabel sat silently, her hand clutching the folds of her old wedding dress, a quiet symbol of her lingering hope. "Maybe I expected too much of myself," she murmured, her voice barely audible, unsure if she spoke to Ethan, to Noah, or simply to herself. Noah looked up at her, his young voice clear and unwavering. "It's okay, Miss Isabel. Falling doesn't mean it's over. Falling is just a way to learn how to stand stronger." Ethan added softly, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. "Sometimes, the greatest miracle is simply having the courage to try again, even when you're not sure you can succeed." Their words, so simple yet so deeply rooted in love and belief, seeped into the cracks of her heart like gentle rain nourishing parched soil. The shadows of fear still lingered, the doubts still whispered in her ear. But within Isabel, a tiny flame flickered to life once more. No, she wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. And in that moment of quiet determination, something changed. This was not an end. It was the beginning of a new kind of strength. Blank. Underscore. Blank. The air inside Maple Leaf Inn that morning was hushed, as if even the old wooden beams and lilac blossoms outside held their breath for what was about to unfold. Isabel sat quietly by the window in her simple room, bathed in the soft light of dawn filtering through sheer curtains. The failures of yesterday weighed heavily on her, like cold chains coiling around her chest. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still feel the sharp sting of collapse, the helplessness in her limbs, the echo of Noah's worried voice. No one disturbed her solitude. Ethan and Noah, understanding her unspoken need for space, left gentle reminders of their support instead. A steaming cup of tea rested on the table, and beside it, a crayon drawing from Noah, bright flowers and smiling faces surrounding big, wobbly letters. Miss Isabel, you can do it. I believe in you. Her eyes blurred with tears. Was she truly worthy of such tenderness? Or was it, perhaps, this very kindness that had kept her from slipping into despair? As the sun climbed higher, casting a warmer light across the floor, Isabel made a choice. A quiet, trembling, but resolute choice. She opened the door. Outside, Ethan sat on the porch steps, shaded by the overhang, watching the garden come to life in the morning glow. The moment he saw her, he rose swiftly, his face alight with both surprise and hope. Isabel, you want to go outside? She took a deep, steadying breath, her voice faint but filled with quiet strength. I can't let that fall yesterday be the last word. Ethan stepped toward her, warmth and unwavering support in his gaze. I'm right here. Lean on me if you need to. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Not from weakness, but determination. She nodded. She knew now. There were journeys no one should take alone. Nearby, Noah caught sight of her and ran over, excitement bubbling in his voice. Miss Isabel, you're going to try again? I made a path with flat stones in the yard, just like the center. True enough, the boy had carefully arranged flat stones leading from the porch to the large maple tree at the end of the garden, a simple path. But for Isabel, it was an entire world. She smiled, the first genuine, soft smile of the day. Then let's try it. Ethan gently helped her to her feet. Her breath came heavy, each muscle trembling as though waking from a long, numbing sleep. Her legs shook under her weight, fragile as autumn leaves in the wind. But in her eyes now, there was no fear, only burning determination. She took her first step. It was hard, slow, and labored, but it was a step. Noah clapped his hands, his joy bright as sunlight. Miss Isabel did it. Ethan whispered, his breath warm against her temple. I always knew you could. Gritting her teeth, Isabel pressed on. Every step was a battle against doubt, against the pain, against her mind whispering she couldn't. Yet, one by one, she crossed the stones, reaching the final stone near the old maple. She paused, her head held high, her chest heaving. Tears blurred her vision, but this time they were not of sorrow, they were tears of triumph. I walked, she breathed, almost disbelieving. I walked. She began to cry, overwhelmed not by pain, but by pride. Her tears washed away the shadows of countless dark days, like spring rains cleansing winter's dust. Ethan squeezed her hand tighter, and in that moment, he knew, she had not only crossed the garden, she had crossed the boundary of her fear. She wasn't walking back to her old self. She was walking toward someone stronger, someone reborn. Noah ran to her, wrapping his small arms around her waist. I knew it. I knew you could do it. Isabel knelt carefully, not from exhaustion, but to meet Noah at eye level. She stroked his hair gently, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you, Noah. You are the reason I didn't give up. Then, she turned to Ethan, her eyes shining with newfound light. And thank you for never letting go. Ethan's smile deepened, a tenderness in his gaze that words could not capture. I never planned to. Isabel. And there, beneath the ancient maple tree, the three of them embraced tightly, not bound by words, but by a silent, unbreakable promise. They needed no grand speeches, no magic from the sky, because they knew, right then, they had created their miracle. Blank. Underscore. Blank. Blank. Underscore. Blank. The next morning dawned brighter than any before at Maple Leaf Inn. The sky, clear and boundless, stretched wide over Willow Springs, bathing the world in golden light. Drops of dew sparkled like tiny diamonds on the petals of blooming lilacs. And the air carried the scent of fresh grass, like a quiet celebration of life awakening. Isabel sat on the old wooden bench in the garden, her new walking stick resting beside her, not as a symbol of weakness, but as a quiet companion on her journey. Her gaze drifted across the yard where Noah, as diligent as ever, was busy arranging smooth stones into a circle, almost as if he were drawing a stage just for her. Ethan approached, 2 steaming cups of coffee in hand. He offered one to her with a gentle smile. "For the lady about to do something extraordinary," he said, pride shimmering in his eyes like sunlight on water. Isabel took the cup, feeling its warmth seep into her hands. "You make it sound as if I'm about to fly," she teased softly. Ethan's smile deepened, his eyes never leaving hers. "In my eyes. You've been flying for a long time." His words, simple yet profound, stirred something deep within her, like the final key turning in a lock that had held her spirit captive for far too long. Before she could respond, Noah's eager voice cut through the morning calm. "Miss Isabel, today, let's have a special class. Okay?" The boy beamed, his excitement infectious. His innocent words resonated within Isabel, as if they were a wake-up call to her heart. She glanced at Ethan, momentarily unsure. "I don't know if I'm ready." Ethan placed his hand gently on her shoulder, his touch steady and reassuring. "You don't have to be ready to begin. You just have to begin." The words sank deep, unlocking a quiet courage within her. Together, they made their way to the Willow Springs Community Center, a place Isabel had once filled with music and joy. Now, as they entered the sunlit hall, the polished wooden floors reflected the morning light like a stage awaiting its dancers. A small crowd had gathered, children and parents alike, their eyes filled with curiosity and quiet hope as they watched Isabel. Among them was a little girl in a wheelchair, her gaze bright with wonder. Isabel's heart trembled at the sight, but she steadied herself, breathing deeply. Stepping into the circle, she raised her voice, warm and clear. "Welcome, everyone. I am Isabel Hartman. Once, I was a dance teacher, and today, I still am." A ripple of smiles spread through the room, and Noah, standing proudly by her side, beamed with pride. Isabel took her place at the center, her walking stick firm in her grasp, her spirit steadier than it had been in years. "Here," she continued, her gaze sweeping the children, "we don't need perfection, we just need courage. Today, we'll learn to dance not just with our feet, but with our hearts." The sincerity in her voice warmed the room like sunlight. She began with simple movements, guiding the children to lift their arms and stretch their legs, not chasing precision but embracing freedom. "Feel the air around you," she encouraged softly. "Let it lift your arms like wings." Ethan watched from the doorway, his eyes never leaving her. She was radiant, not just as the woman he loved, but as a beacon of life, a testament to resilience born from pain. With every motion, Isabel taught them more than dance. She taught them how to embrace their flaws, to cherish their journeys, to find beauty in their scars. When the class ended, applause filled the hall, small hands clapping enthusiastically, parents wiping away tears of quiet joy. Isabel bowed her head, tears of gratitude glimmering in her eyes. Yet her smile was as bright as the morning sun. Noah rushed forward, hugging her tightly. "I told you, Miss Isabel, you're the best teacher in the world." She knelt carefully to meet his eyes, embracing him close. "No, Noah, I'm not the best teacher. But I am someone who never gave up." Ethan approached, placing a hand on her shoulder with quiet pride. "And that's the most beautiful lesson you taught them today." That evening, in the small, warm room of Maple Leaf Inn, Isabel opened her journal once more. Under the golden light of a simple lamp, she wrote, "Today, I taught my first class since everything changed. I taught not how to become a perfect dancer, but how to love ourselves as we are, to cherish our imperfections, and to embrace the journey we walk." She closed the journal, her heart lighter than it had been in years. As she looked up, she saw Ethan gathering the lesson notes, their eyes meeting with a shared understanding. In Isabel's chest, no longer did fear dwell, only a quiet, pure peace, like the dawn after the longest night. She finally understood. She did not need to become the woman she once was. She had become someone far greater, a woman who danced with her heart. And who, through her scars, had learned how to shine. Blank. Underscore. Blank. Blank. Underscore. Blank. The final days of summer drifted by softly, like thin clouds gliding lazily across the sky over Willow Springs. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of fresh grass and wildflowers from the meadows beyond. At Maple Leaf Inn, everything felt unusually calm, as if even the house itself was breathing easier alongside the hearts that had found refuge within its walls. In the small courtyard behind the inn, under the shade of the old maple tree, Isabel and Noah sat together, heads bent over colorful papers and worn crayons. "What are you drawing, Noah?" Isabel asked, her voice a gentle breeze against the warm afternoon. The boy looked up, his eyes sparkling like the morning sun. "I'm drawing your wedding day." "Miss Isabel, you and Dad." His enthusiasm painted the scene brighter than any color could. Isabel's heart skipped. For a moment, her breath caught as she watched his innocent smile. And something tender, something fragile yet powerful, bloomed quietly in her chest. Noah continued, his small hands busy sketching. "You'll wear a creamy white dress. Dad will wear a white shirt like the grooms in movies. And I'll be the ring bearer." Isabel laughed softly, a sound like the sun breaking through clouds after a storm. "You've thought this through quite a bit, haven't you? Because I want you to be part of our family." Noah answered without hesitation, his voice so pure, so sincere it tightened something deep in Isabel's chest. She lowered her head, hiding the tears welling in her eyes. At that moment, Ethan stepped out from the house, carrying 2 glasses of cool lemonade. He had overheard the conversation, and his chest swelled with emotion that pressed against his ribs. Without saying a word, he set the glasses down on the table, his eyes meeting Isabel's with a depth that needed no words. In that gaze, Isabel saw everything. The man who had weathered his storms. The father who carried his son's hopes. The heart that, like hers, had known loss but still beat with unwavering resilience. And she realized, right then, that these 2 souls, one grown, one still growing, were both extending their hands toward her, inviting her into the little world they had built from pieces of hope. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Ethan led Isabel to a place he had carefully prepared. Behind the village church, in an old, overgrown garden, stood a wooden arch woven with wildflowers and strung with simple paper lanterns. Noah and Ethan had hung them together earlier that day, each lantern swaying gently in the summer breeze like stars brought down from the heavens. The golden light bathed everything in warmth, and for a heartbeat, time itself seemed to pause. Ethan stopped beneath the old maple tree, its sprawling branches casting gentle shadows over them. He reached into his pocket and drew out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a simple silver ring, delicately engraved with one single word inside. "Now, Isabel," Ethan began, his voice low, steady, but carrying the weight of years of unspoken longing. "We've spent too long trapped by the past, too long fearing what might go wrong. But I don't want to wait anymore to tell you this." He slowly knelt, not as a man offering rescue, but as an equal partner, a companion on life's winding path. "I don't need perfection. I only need truth. A life that's real. With you, with Noah, with all the ups and downs we will face together. Isabel Hartman, will you write the rest of this story with me?" Her heart pounded like 1,000 wild wings in her chest. For years, she had lived in the shadow of loss, of fear, of sorrow too deep to speak. But now, in this moment, everything inside her whispered one answer. Tears sparkled in her eyes, but her smile bloomed like the last flower of summer. "Ethan, I've been ready for so long. I just didn't realize it." She extended her trembling hand. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, and in that moment, the lantern seemed to glow brighter, as if the universe itself bore witness to their quiet vow. Noah, unable to contain his joy, ran toward them. "Miss Isabel said yes. We're a family now." Isabel pulled him into her embrace, holding him close. "Not going to be, Noah. We already are." Ethan wrapped them both in his arms. And together, beneath the branches of the old maple, the three of them stood, not as fragments of broken pasts, but as a whole, unshakable family. They needed no fancy ceremony, no grand speeches, because they knew they had already created their miracle. That night, when all had quieted and the paper lanterns swayed softly in the summer breeze, Isabel opened her journal. Her hands no longer trembled as she wrote. Today, he asked me to be part of his life, not with promises of a flawless future, but with the honesty of a shared journey. And I said yes, not just to the ring, but to the life ahead of us. She closed the journal and looked out the window, where the moonlight bathed the garden in silver. And I know, she whispered to herself, miracles are not in perfection. They are in the courage to begin again. Blank. Blank. 1 year after that quiet proposal beneath the lantern-lit maple tree, Willow Springs bloomed more beautifully than ever in its late spring glory. The fields surrounding the village were blanketed in wildflowers, spreading in a vibrant carpet of color beneath the endless blue sky. The air carried the gentle sweetness of honey and the lively songs of birds weaving melodies through the branches of freshly green trees. But today, the air felt even more alive. It wasn't just the season. It was the promise of something special. Maple Leaf Inn, once merely a shelter for weary souls, had transformed into a house of quiet miracles. Garlands of fresh flowers draped over every beam. Strings of lights twinkled playfully in the sunlight, and laughter rang out like music drifting on the breeze. Inside, bathed in the golden light of morning, Isabel stood before a tall mirror. Her wedding dress was not the elaborate, heavy gown of her past. It was simpler, elegant silk that hugged her form softly, embroidered with delicate hand-stitched blossoms. It did not try to hide her scars. Instead, it embraced them, honored them, as if they were the brushstrokes of a masterpiece painted by life itself. She let her fingers trail lightly along the faint mark on her leg, no longer feeling shame or sorrow. Those scars were her proof. She had survived. She had risen. She had grown. The door creaked open gently. Noah peeked in, his hair neatly combed, his small suit slightly oversized but worn with a pride that filled the room. Miss Isabel, he called softly. It's time. Isabel turned toward him, her heart full to bursting with a quiet, radiant joy. Then let's go, my little ring bearer. Noah grinned widely and ran to her side, slipping his hand into hers. No longer to support her, but as a companion, as family. Outside, the garden of Maple Leaf Inn had been transformed into a dream. Paper lanterns swayed in the gentle breeze, casting warm glows between the flower garlands. Friends, neighbors, and Isabel's dance students had gathered, their faces alight with affection and anticipation. They weren't here just to witness a wedding. They were here to celebrate a resurrection, a life rebuilt from ashes, a love reborn from loss. Ethan stood beneath the flowered arch, waiting. He wore a simple white shirt, as Noah had dreamed, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a boutonniere of wild lilacs pinned to his chest. But it was not the clothing that made him shine. It was the way he looked to Isabel as she stepped into the aisle, as though she were the sunrise itself. She walked toward him, her steps sure, her spine straight, her eyes bright with fearless hope. Her cane accompanied her, but it no longer defined her. She was not leaning on it. She was leading it. As she passed by the rows of chairs, smiles greeted her like sunlight breaking through the clouds. Noah, at her side, whispered, "You look the most beautiful in the whole world, Miss Isabel." She smiled softly and squeezed his hand. "Thanks to you, sweetheart." When she reached Ethan, she placed her hand in his, not as a symbol of surrender, but as a choice of partnership, of shared strength. Ethan lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss onto her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm not marrying you because you're perfect," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "I'm marrying you because we never gave up on each other." There was no grand procession, no dramatic ceremony. Their vows were simple, but they rang true. Margot Blaine, the therapist who had witnessed Isabel's first trembling steps back to hope, officiated the ceremony. Her voice, filled with emotion, carried across the garden. "Today, we celebrate not just the joining of two hearts, but the triumph of love over fear, of resilience over despair. They exchanged rings, plain silver bands imbued with stories no gold could ever carry. As they slid them onto each other's fingers, the sunlight caught the engravings inside, simple words carved deep, invisible to others but known in their hearts. Noah's voice rang out in excitement. "We're a family now." The crowd erupted in applause, laughter, and joyous cheers. Ethan drew Isabel close, and together, with Noah between them, they stood beneath the archway of wildflowers, not as survivors, but as creators of their miracle. That evening, as dusk settled over Willow Springs and lanterns glowed like captured stars in the garden, they sat beneath the old maple tree. Noah, tired from the excitement, rested his head in Isabel's lap, his breaths soft and peaceful. "See, Miss Isabel?" he murmured, half asleep. "I told you, miracles do happen." She brushed a kiss across his forehead, her heart overflowing. "Yes, Noah, and you were my first one." Ethan wrapped his arm around her shoulders, his voice a warm rumble. "Miracles happen when we dare to love. Even when life isn't perfect." The three of them, silhouetted against the lantern-lit garden, formed a portrait of quiet triumph, a reminder that from brokenness can bloom the most extraordinary beauty. In the hush of that moment, Isabel opened her journal for the final time that night. Her pen moved smoothly across the page, her words steady and sure. "Today, we did not marry for perfection. We married for truth, for the shared journey of every scar, every fall, every small victory. And as I close this chapter, I know, our story is only just beginning." She set the journal down, leaned into Ethan's embrace, and together they watched the night sky stretch wide above them. Because they knew, truly, deeply, this was not the end. This was their forever beginning.